Assessment is known across multiple domains, but certainly within poker, to be the best path, the best way to articulate improvement, degradation, trend lines, spot where interventions are needed. Yet we see this sort of resistant environment that's holding it up. So I'm hoping to solve, at least in this little micro niche, a bit of that assessment paradox by deburdening coaches, deburdening players.
Welcome to SaaS That App, building B2B web applications, the podcast where we share real-world stories, practical advice, and tech insights for those building or thinking about starting a tech-enabled business. I am your co-host, Aaron Marchbanks.
And I'm Justin Edwards. Each week we bring you the stories, strategies, and insights you need to build your SaaS or tech-enabled business smarter, not harder. Let's dive right in. Yo, how is it going? We're back for yet another episode. Aaron, my bow-tied companion, how are we doing?
Doing well. I have added the sweater to the attire today because it is freaking freezing here. And I'm next to two beautiful windows, which love to leach the cold into my room.
Oh, yeah. What is your wind chill currently?
Currently, it's not awful. Wind chill's around like 6 or 8, but this weekend, super looking forward to wind chill of like minus 17 for my long run. And yeah, really not looking forward to that at all.
Yeah. Well, I got two folks here in cold climates, and I'm enjoying the 80-degree weather down here, so that is what it is. Our guest today has a degree in philosophy. He has an MBA. He is a software developer, a data manager, and more importantly, today's conversation, he is also a poker player and a founder. Jason, welcome to the podcast. This is Jason Gondziola.
Thanks, fellas. I'm really glad to be here.
So, just to start off with the product that you're bringing, you have a product that's about to launch or pre-launch. Tell us a little bit more about Stratagem.
Yeah. So Stratagem is, I believe, the world's first dedicated poker learning management system. And it seeks to, in sort of the first iteration, solve some problems that poker coaches face around repetitive tasks, lack of clear assessment and tracking of their players' outcomes, and handling some of the administrative burden that they might face.
Poker coaching does not seem to me to be like an obvious business-to-business niche. I'm super curious how you landed upon it.
Yeah, it's definitely very niche. In my other life, I am a studied, serious poker hobbyist. I play intermittently. As my friend puts it, I have poker seasons. So in the past, once I realized that the strategies I cultivated circa 2006 just didn't work anymore, I wound up seeking coaching. And in the process of doing that, discovered that there's no real clear, shared, rigorous approach to how player data, player analytics are collected, analyzed, and shared by coaches. So I sought to start to do a little feeling around on that. I know a bunch of people from the scene. I started to reach out to them, talk to some professionals, talk to some coaches, and get a feeling for, is anything like this out there? What are you using? What's your workflow? And based on that, kind of started doing a very deep customer validation process where we evolved a set of features that I think would suit poker coaches well. And that has led to, again, the first iteration of the product.
So for folks who maybe aren't super familiar with poker, who maybe view it as like a game of chance or just gambling, can you speak a little bit to kind of like why someone would engage with a poker coach? Like, is the game winnable?
It's definitely beatable. It is consistently the only beatable game in a casino. Blackjack, you could say at times is beatable depending on what the house rules are. But poker is unique in that you're not playing against the house, you're playing against other players. So in the words of a poker pro friend of mine, his job every morning is to wake up and find the 8 dumbest people who are playing cards in Los Angeles and get at a table with them. You know, and there obviously is that kind of sharky, predatory vibe about it. You are effectively taking the place of the house in a good poker game by saying, I'm going to lay you odds that are actually bad for you, but you're going to call because you're not thinking deeply enough about what you should be doing here. So there's that element of it for sure. Definitely poker is a beatable game.
The application such as you developed, does it have or does it include components of teaching, of lessons outside of just here's information for you to be able to absorb and do with as you will?
So the foundational thesis of what I'm doing with the Stratagem system is poker right now has a large glut of knowledge creation, and that's in the form typically of things that are coming out of solvers, which are basically computer algorithms that play against each other and find these optimum lines. There's a saturation of that kind of information. What we're really lacking is knowledge management. So the system is actually very infrastructural. It's not there coming pre-populated with a bunch of lessons. It's there for poker knowledge keepers typically coaches, to come and input what they have for their students so that their students can, through reinforcement learning algorithms, through different kinds of range exploration, pick up on elements of the game that the coach has identified as being their weak points.
So could you give an example of like something that maybe someone's going to work on and how they would kind of engage with their coach on that problem, and then how the platform would enable them to kind of drill that thing that's a weak point in their game?
Yeah, definitely. So, for instance, one of the coaches that I'm working with, you have a situation with his player pool where they are going to be sitting in live tournaments a lot where somebody completes the small blind. So what that means is they don't raise, they just call the blind. So that it's a very weak passive play. And the optimal strategy in that situation is honestly to raise probably any 2 cards. So what you could do is set up that scenario within Stratagem and set up a series of drills for the player to drill that. And you can actually be intelligent about it by blending that scenario in with other types of situations that they would encounter, so that it's not just obvious force feeding of, I know, raise. The platform will mix in the study hands with other randomized parts of the game so that you're giving a chance to reinforce that learning outcome in a more contextually appropriate or realistic environment.
Okay, and then they get to drill that, and it's not just the same hand over and over. It blends in different kinds of hands, but then they get to identify the situation when it comes up and then take the correct action. And then there's a feedback piece after that where they get rated on kind of, did they raise enough or...
Yeah, definitely. So there's an analytics dashboard that collects data from a number of different elements of the player's behavior within the platform. Obviously, the simple one is, did you bet the right hand that was in the right part of your range at that point in time? That's going to be a check mark. But we're also tracking about 10 other different analytic markers that the coach can use to intuit further details on where the player is going wrong. There's another element to the platform as well, in that one of the pain points we're trying to solve administratively is poker coaching right now, from like an application perspective, is this distributed web of different activities with different pieces of software. So we're unifying elements of that coaching practice into a single UI. A perfect example would be hand histories. So most online players are collecting their hand histories. They're probably using software like Poker Tracker to track that and review. They can then export those hands. And generally what they would do is they go into Poker Tracker, export the hands, go into their email, attach it, send it to the coach. The coach then downloads it, opens it in Poker Tracker, goes back in email and annotates it. That entire workflow is collapsed into our system now so that you can upload hands, coaches can review them, tag them directly on it, and queue them for review at your next session as well. So trying to really simplify and smooth out these tiny little fractional 2 minutes there, 3 minutes there for these high hourly rate individuals, service providers, so that, it's going to be worth the price, as it were.
Talk a little bit about the pricing model that you've either got in mind or you've sort of already implemented. I'm curious, is this like a pretty standard service model? Is it like a monthly fee? Is it a per user sort of thing? Or is there like tiering for various skill sets of coaches?
So the pricing model currently is going to be somewhat of a blend of a monthly subscription cost for coaches. Players who are working with a coach will have access to a suite of functions within the tool for free. But if they want to sort of go a bit further, a bit deeper, they can add on a sort of a higher tier. For coaches as well, we're also looking at caseload as a benchmark. So the coach who has, 3 to 5 players is going to have a different price point from the coach who has 15. The other sort of market that I'm really looking at with a lot of interest is the coaching for profits or staking market. So right now, this might frighten people away from sitting down at online tables, but basically there are groups of people doing mass data analytics on player tendencies within different player pools, and they're aggregating that data and then using that to evolve a non-game theory optimal exploitative strategy where they're kind of poking at the places where you're weak and where you're maybe not defending enough, or maybe you're over bluffing. They're using that data to send their players out in the field. And that is a market I'm very interested in approaching, because we can actually aggregate the entire player pool data of their staked players and use that to evaluate performance.
Let me just put a couple of definitions for folks who aren't involved in the poker world. So game theory optimal is the idea there's kind of the appropriate way to play mathematically. And sometimes when you're playing against a person who's not playing optimally, there are mistakes versus what's game theory optimal, but they're actually the best way to play against that player. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but you're basically saying that there's people who are analyzing player behaviors and then playing different than the optimal game in order to exploit things that they think those players are doing wrong. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, that would be called an exploitative strategy. And that leaves you open to exploitation, but that's okay. That's the trade-off that you're making because your hourly or your return on investment is going to be higher as a player.
Well, and there you're playing the player, not the game.
That's right. Exactly that. Yeah.
Real quick, this episode is brought to you by Delta Systems, which is what Aaron and I do when we're not talking through microphones to you, the people of the internet. We've got a really, really great software team here, and we love to work with cool people on cool projects. So if that sounds like you and you've got a problem or you're in some kind of a jam, go to deltasystems.com, grab the time with us. We can beat up on your problem together, and if there's a fit there, amazing, we'll help you out. So deltasystems.com, grab an appointment, and hey, maybe we can work together.
Does any part of your analytics involve video components, facial recognition, ticks, tells, things along those lines? Or is that something maybe that's way down the road on a roadmap?
There are a number of people out there who are already doing a lot of work with analytics on tells, on timings. There's actually an individual that has made a large data set of timing tells. So what that means is you took this long in a pot this size and you bet this much. How many of times was that a bluff and how many times was that value? And I'm very interested in talking to those people who are holding these data sets more on the basis of an integration model of saying, look, we can use your data on a subscription basis for certain users who want to pay that extra premium and aggregate it in even just via a strict API call. Like, I don't have to hold your data to make this successful. But I do think like having a centralized venue to annotate poker knowledge is maybe another way to look at the play that I'm trying to make here.
Sure. And obviously, AI is very hot these days and is only going to become more so. I'm assuming that there is some component of that's leveraged within your system or to help build it or to build out these data sets, or no?
I'd say that the AI involvement in Stratagem, certainly on the development side, I'm in a very AI-enabled development environment. Within the system, I'm definitely looking to do some natural language processing where you basically speak a hand history and it will translate it to a schema that my system understands for storage. That's a real pain point. Again, live poker coaches have addressed is, hey, how do I get these live hands in quickly? I'm in the middle of something. Well, if you could just speak it into a recorder directly into the app, we would then transcribe it into a notation that the system understands. Other elements, maybe I sort of really want to be mindful to walk the line and not end up delivering the poison pill. Kills poker coaching, right? Like, I actually think I'm a bit of a traditionalist, even though I'm a highly technical person, that I really think human-to-human contact is important. I think humans are very good at contextualizing and sort of some of these more intuitive type of analyses. And I want to make sure that there's always space for that within the market. So at this point, I'm not really looking at like highly AI-enabled strategies that are going to end up replacing the human judgment. I'm actually trying to use this as a streamlined way to get the clutter out of the way when you need a human in the loop.
All right. So you're technical, so I get to dig in. What's your tech stack? What'd you write this thing in?
It's on a PostgreSQL database with a Node API layer, React on top. Inside of my IDE, I'm using VS Code. And let me back the truck up. It's always been in VS Code, but I started writing this thing back when ChatGPT 3 and then 3.5 were the models. So it was like, I don't know if you were developing using those tools at the time, but like you're shuttling stuff out of one window into another. Finally, someone said, hey, why don't we just make the AI live in your IDE? And it was like, thank you for that. So I had like massive sets of rules and ongoing documentation and self-documenting agents and different sort of tasks or commands that can be called within it. I've actually written in the process of this a whole other piece of software that I might end up sort of marketing, but it's like a work queue management system that sort of hybridizes views between a Kanban style board and sort of interactive node graph to show you dependencies. That kind of stuff is what I'm using to develop it because I am flying solo. Like, I'm completely bootstrapped. I wake up at 5 a.m. every day. This is what I do. I wake up and do this for a few hours, get my kid on the bus, go do my bike ride, come back in and do another hour and a half until my workday starts, and then fit in any other time that I can. So the LLM enabled coding environments have been, I couldn't have done it without it 100%. I just wouldn't have had the time or the bankroll.
Yeah. And I want to continue to bring more content that's specific to how people are engaging with AI and how people are using it. We had a guest very recently who spent a long time talking about his AI coding environment. He's a little bit different than mine, but very cool. And yeah, I think there's not a ton of content out there about people discussing the pros and cons of their different ways of engaging with AI, specifically in the development process, which as of like this year, late last year, early this year, has actually been a game changer. The changes we've seen in the last 6 months are remarkable. Before that, I was ready to say, I don't think this is exactly ready yet. And now I'm becoming convinced that we're here, and that's the way that everything is moving. So we'd love to have you back on for that if you want to share more specifics about your setup with a group of folks.
Yeah, I would. And maybe just one quick comment on that. I think one of the interesting differences that has changed as we've sort of crossed that 6-month horizon where you do have these agents that are very capable is you as a developer get to think at this higher level of abstraction, and you almost think almost more like a product owner might. You're sort of thinking about these sort of feature sets. You can deliver things in plain English. You can also, as a developer, spot and say, hey, I notice you're reinventing the wheel here. Direct your attention to this component, which will actually do what we're trying to do here already. So it's not quite at the place where you can take your hands off the wheel. I'm still watching all the outputs because plenty of times reinventing the wheel is I'd say that's a real sort of tendency of the LLM environment right now.
Yes, they're extremely great at generating content, and they don't actually have a lot of attention to proper organization, and they tend to bias towards creating their own stuff. And I've, very similar to you, though, I specifically interrupt my agents a lot and be like, hey, I'm already doing that in this service. Please just lift and shift that thing that I'm already doing. Like, don't write this again.
Yeah. Or make this component generalizable so many of the consumers can now use it instead of basically writing it 3 extra times.
And please don't put emojis into comments into my file.
No emojis. It's one of my rules.
Haven't we all checked that box by now?
Yeah.
That one had no hyphens. I checked that one very quickly.
Oh, that hurts me though. I was a professional writer for many years. I love the M dash, and I feel like I'm just watching it die, and I feel so sheepish now when I use it because I know people are looking, being like, hey, what is this, AI generated? I'm like, no, the M dash is awesome.
No argument there. I really appreciate punctuation in all of its forms. I just can't stand the overuse or misuse. That drives me absolutely crazy.
Get it on a shirt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where are my semicolons? I'm all about that. Yeah. Bring that stuff on. Please don't take away my Oxford comma,
Never.
So things like this. Well, back on the tech side, you had mentioned you're closing in on a beta. Is that right?
Yeah.
That was going to be my first question is how close are you? What's that looking like?
We are, I would say, 14 days away from beta. At this point, I have all of the major screens and interfaces done, obviously all the backend and analytics and all that. And I'm just locking up that sort of version 1 of the loop. Like, how do you enter? What does your screen look like? What do you keep returning to as a user? And I've actually got an instructional design consultant who's going to be looking at that tomorrow, specifically with that view, particularly also because one of the things I really want to do is take good, strong pedagogical concepts and effectively abstract them into the UI so that it forces the coach to behave in the best practices of learning and learning management. Because the reality is poker coaches they're not. That is you generally don't have a lot of teachers who end up going into poker coaching. So if your UI can actually guide them towards best practice, their coaching practice is going to be better for it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm a former instructor in several ways myself, and I really appreciate good adult learning process and was trained in several different ways myself. And that only improved what I was actually trying to teach in the first place. So, my mentor always said, I can teach you the process by which you go about this to make your learning models better, help you, engage better. Where you need to come in is on the skill. So, in that particular case, it was on technical stuff, how to Microsoft Word and Excel and Novell networks and things like that. So, I had all of that. I just need to know how to put that forward better. So I appreciate that aspect very much of what it is that you're trying to do. Those best practices mean a lot.
Awesome. And that means a lot just hearing that, because I think that's one of these untested ideas that haven't been tested in the field yet on my product. I mean, I know in lived experience of others, but to take that and apply it into particularly the poker coaching niche to see how's that going to go.
Yeah. And in a general sense, adult learning is very different than when you're younger. The process by which we learn as adults is very different than when you're younger. The curves are at different points along the way, to say the least. But that sort of stuff very much interests me. I'm always excited about that. My mother was a teacher. My mother-in-law is a teacher. I was raised by educators. And so that's always been something that's very near and dear to my heart. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. My sister's a teacher too. Yeah. A lot of respect.
Yeah. I think having learning science inform product, especially when the product is supposed to teach something, it just makes a ton of sense. It shouldn't be as novel as it is, but hats off to you for doing that. I think it's exactly right. One question I had, which is a little bit more for your customers, but are you actually doing analysis versus like game theory optimal on hand histories in order to help coaches just to flag for them what the leaks in the game are? Or is that largely dependent on them? Or how does your platform enable coaches to figure out what to focus on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's already very good products on the market that are providing that take my hand and compare it to the baseline GTO approach. If a coach wants to input GTO theories into Stratagem and run that analysis, 100% that will happen. But that may not be the most expedient place to come from as an educator or as a coach where they're concerned. They might actually be interested more in that earlier example of just raise any two cards. I know that's not exactly GTO. GTO might have you sort of mixing or folding some degree, but for where you're at in your learning journey in this particular spot where small blind limps, you need to just blast them. And until you can kind of repeatedly do that, we're not going to get into the nuance of how you develop a well-balanced range for that particular moment. It's going to be very much, we're going to brute force this till you get it and then get a little more sophisticated.
Oh, another question, which is more of a poker question than a software question. But like for my typical game, I'm a no limit player when I play. So I'm playing small stakes, no limit, 2-5, 1-2. I played 5-10 once. Let's not talk about that. But it was a lot of money that went away really quick. Anyway, but my typical small stakes, it's just like I'm raising pretty wide. I'm c-betting at 90%, and that's my game. I mean, it's exploitable, but there's a few people, like, depending on who's in the hand, I'll be like, I don't want to play a hand with that guy. And so, like, I won't c-bet on him if he's the only one left in the hands. I know it'll play back at me or whatever. But for the most part, I'm just sitting there, and very rarely do I get to showdown. And if I do, it's like I have a really good hand and I'm basically at the flop being like, I'm going to the river on this hand and my goal now is to get all my chips into the middle. Like that's the level of, so really like that's pretty much most hands that I play. So it's a huge amount of preamble, but is there like an adaptation that happens as you bump stakes and the average player at your table is actually not going to be beaten by a c-bet or, bomb every flop and then c-bet?
Yes. Rewind in time to circa 2015 when I came back. I took almost 10 years off of poker. And when I came back, I had the exact same strategy. Raise wide, c-bet almost every time. People just folded. It was like printing money. I'm playing online mostly, partly because I live in a rural area, partly because my preferred game, Limit Hold'em, really isn't spread anywhere except for places very far from where I live. So as a result, I end up playing this kind of niche game. What I walked into in the mid 2010s was a player pool that was much more sophisticated than the one I left. And so now you need to start thinking a little more advanced. So when you end up in these situations where you have a higher degree of sophistication, where your opponents are basically tougher, you start to get into all of these leveling wars where you're coming into a spot and you're like, I'm c-betting wide. They know I'm c-betting wide. Therefore, I'm going to re-raise, not super wide, but with a balanced range that does include some bluffs or semi-bluffs so that when certain cards come up on the next street, I can represent something or keep barreling as though they think I made my hand on the first street. So yes, to answer your question, it does get more and more complicated as you go up in stakes, and those counter strategies become more and more nuanced because you are now taking a wider set of behaviors into consideration where the ranges of those behaviors are balanced. So somebody who's coming back at you is going to be bluffing some of the time. Whereas when you're playing small stakes, the guy who re-raises you probably almost always has it. So it's an easy fold.
That makes sense. So you're kind of essentially trying to polarize your range where you're either holding the best thing ever or something that's not too great. And on the earlier streets, if you're holding something that's not too great, that might turn into something pretty good, you're more inclined to play those hands from the crappy part of your range there.
Yeah. And your c-betting frequency on those early streets, your continuation bet, is going to contain cards that are likely to improve on later streets. So if you hold cards in your hand and there is no backdoor flush draw, for instance, you're probably not even going to bother c-betting them in some cases because you're going to get blown off your hand every time the person raises.
So within your system, are there mechanisms for showing that to players? Like, you've improved this much. We're going to move you into like a new tier, or your coach in some way rewards you with, I'll just call them points, something to indicate that you have moved into another level or something where you can take in a wider amount of variables in a given situation?
Yeah. I mean, you just gave me an idea maybe for a feature where a coach can suggest a stake level that you might be ready for. Right now, the way it goes is, you do get feedback. Your coach gets feedback. it doesn't necessarily aggregate that into saying, hey, based on your behavior, you'd be really good at this level. But it does give you sort of feedback. And again, back to my earlier point about these different inference mechanisms, which are going to collect other data points based on your behavior. All of that can kind of be aggregated into a more complete picture. The version 1 beta is going to be really straightforward. It's honestly much more based on like right, wrong, heat maps and stuff like that. But again, as we collect data, we can start to mine it. We can use machine learning to basically spot out where somebody's improving or degrading based on a much broader set than just right and wrong.
Yeah, so that actually leads me to another question that I actually had earlier, but this I think is a better spot for it. So from a technical standpoint, from a software development standpoint, you've got this beta that you've worked up, you're about to release. So stepping back just a little bit, how do you, as the owner and builder of this product, how do you demarcate, we are at beta, this is good enough for me to release, I've hit a certain set of features that I'm happy with? Is it, I want to do these 10 things, but I know when I get to thing 3 or 4, I'm ready to release? What's your process there for deciding this is good enough to release for now, and the rest goes on a roadmap?
I think a lot of that really does come down to the customer validation and pre-planning that went into this, where I am really trying to check boxes off in terms of solving different pain points that I'm hearing. So as I'm coming to the end of that first round of pain points, I'm saying, okay, I'm confident that this is going to solve them. And the other piece of that is I'm confident that there's a workflow within this that the user can follow to solve those pain points, that I've got enough screens in the way and it's not having to do 3 clicks to get over here, that everything kind of flows and dumps into each other.
So I'd love to know a little bit about your plan for marketing this. Is there like a user-only tier where people are going to start using this at that level without a coach? Is it just for coaches? Like, what's your plans for your rollout as you get into your beta?
I think the real underlying thesis of the product is, I know I'm calling it a poker learning management system, but it's actually a poker data storage and annotation system. It's more truly a knowledge management system that's just been skinned as an LMS. So as a result, where I really think that there's some room here is this tool can be used to capture and describe hands from, I believe right now, something like 19 poker variants. So I'm not just doing Hold'em. You can do deuce to 7 low ball. You can do Badoogie. You can do Archie or ace to 5. Like there's all sorts of games that are really atypical that are kind of fun because they haven't been solved. So one particular very organic marketing direction I'm really curious about is, can a tool like this be used on forums or even as its own simple social forum of, here's this weird hand in this weird game you've never heard of, up thumb, down thumb for each action on the node of this game tree right here. Like, what decision would you take? So I think that there's an element of that could be interesting. I think the other part of my marketing strategy is to just put it out there. What people have told me is I'm pretty atypical as far as poker and poker software devs go. I have a really diverse background that includes a lot of community-based consultation work and building systems that suit. And that's across like mental health. It's First Nations language reclamation is an area that I've done extensive work in. I think for me to come out and maybe talk a bit about some of the behind the scenes thinking and frameworks that I'm using to develop this might provide some interesting content, and to sort of maybe challenge the community to think a little less siloed and in a little more of an integrated way. So the Cole's notes on how I'd put it, I'd say it's sort of like this category creation, thought leadership sort of play, because coaching has lasted 20 years with no real software backbone. And I'm also a certified change management professional. So I recognize very clearly this is going to be a change management problem, maybe even more than anything else. So I think part of it is making the case, making content that's going to illustrate it, encouraging people to play within it. So I think from a marketing perspective, it's sort of this somewhat of a spaghetti mess, but there's an octopus at the middle of all those tentacles, if you will.
Yeah, I think that you're, again, I'm going to keep coming back to it because I just really appreciate that you're approaching this from the angle of teaching or being taught and learning. I mean, there's obviously just truckloads of stuff out there about the game of poker. I did actually get through the book of Super System and things like that, back in the day. But I find it very refreshing that you're taking a place where there is obviously this wealth of knowledge, and there is certainly an enormous following, and it has had no systematized approach to teaching people how to get there other than those who like pick up a book or know the, same 5 people that wind up at the table every single time. So I really very much appreciate that. My question that I was going to have from the very beginning of this, and you've already kind of answered it, is your lean more toward creating a learning management tool or system that could be leveraged for other games? Or is this to create something for the world of poker that also happens to have the advantage of being a learning management system?
I'd say initially it's probably more the latter, where this is really poker-centric, but a lot of the sort of abstraction techniques and object transformations at the game tree level certainly would be applicable to any other complete or incomplete information game. The principles of reinforcement learning and space repetition algorithms, right? Like those types of background mechanisms are useful for any type of learning. But for the next few years, I would imagine it's going to be very poker-centric. But you never know. I mean, sometimes some weird pivot opportunity comes up, like I know a developer that was working on a tool and he immediately thought, hey, this might be really good for chess. And it's like, sure. I mean, yes.
That's where my head was going. Yep.
Backgammon, chess. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that really lends itself well to a sort of node-based tree where you can recurse down, calculate values, minimize regret, like that's what solvers do. So there's plenty of games that do that.
Well, is there anything we should have asked you about Stratagem, about your journey that we didn't? That's too good to let go?
If I was going to sum it up, I'd say that there's this really interesting, I've kind of taken to calling it the assessment paradox in poker. And it's interesting. This happens in mental health as well. There's 20 years of evidence behind measurement-based care, which is in my day job. I just finished running a large provincial project across, 39 different sites trying to get frontline providers to use rigorous ongoing measurement. And that was also a change management challenge. And I think we have this interesting sort of paradox where assessment is known across multiple domains, but certainly within poker, to be the best path, the best way to articulate improvement, degradation, trend lines, spot where interventions are needed. Yet we see this sort of resistant environment that's holding it up. So I'm hoping to solve, at least in this little micro niche, a bit of that assessment paradox by deburdening coaches, deburdening players, and sort of allowing that free flowing of information so that they can do the work that's actually in their domain. They don't have to be office admins. They don't have to shoot from the hip and come at this from an intuitive perspective, So I think that's maybe, if I was going to sum it up, the real vision of what I'm trying to do here.
Absolutely. Well said. I think that's probably a great place to clip it. Where can folks connect with you? Where can folks sign up for the beta?
Yeah, head on over to Stratagem, STRATAGEM.poker. There's a waitlist sign up there. You can email me at info@stratagem.poker. Our socials are all down there. We've got a Discord sign up. Just scroll down to the footer. It's all there. Oh, and blogs. I've got a blog at labs.stratagem.poker as well, if you're interested.
We will link to all of that in the doobly-doo, I think the YouTube people say, in the show notes for podcast folks. I'm bad at social media. Cool. Well, thanks so much for flying along with us, Jason. It was awesome to meet you. It was awesome to learn about Stratagem.
Thanks for having me.
Aaron, always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Indeed. Love the session.
Thanks so much, and good luck to all of our poker players out there.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks for cruising along with us on SaaS That App. We hope you grabbed some insights that were inspiring, actionable, or at least entertaining.
If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and keep those apps sassy.